You keep wondering why your life feels stuck, why your energy's drained, why every day looks like a repeat of the one before. Let's be honest, you're not lacking discipline. You're not lacking intelligence. You're just focusing on the wrong thing. And today that ends. Because in this video, I'm going to show you how to shift from feeding the problem to building the solution with clarity, responsibility, and momentum. You'll understand how your focus silently shapes your reality. And you'll walk away with a mental reset so strong that you'll never look at problems the same way again. By the end, you'll know exactly how to turn your mind into a builder, not a prisoner. And in the final minutes, I'll give you a sentence to repeat every time your brain tries to fall back into the old loop, a phrase that brings you back to action instantly. But first, let me ask you something that might sting a little. You say you want change, but every thought you repeat is about what's wrong. Every conversation you have reinforces the problem, and every time you sit in silence, your mind pulls you back into the same loop. Why is this still happening to me? Why can't I fix it? Why does it feel like I'm losing control? The truth is brutal. You're not stuck because of the problem. You're stuck because you keep feeding it. With attention, with emotion, with identity. You've made the problem your anchor. You wake up already reliving yesterday's frustration. You fall asleep forecasting tomorrow's failure. And all day, you carry the weight of what's broken, instead of reaching for what can be built. But that can change now, because what you focus on expands. And every second you spend looping what's wrong, you delay the moment where you could be building what's right. So today, we draw a line. This isn't a pep talk. This is a pattern break. This is where you stop giving energy to what drains you and start feeding what will finally move you forward. If you're ready for that shift, breathe, settle in, and let's begin. You don't realize it, but the problem isn't just something that happened to you. It's become the place you live, the lens you look through, the narrative you keep repeating to yourself, even when no one's around. You've normalized it. You talk about it like it's part of who you are. You say, I've always been like this. This always happens to me. And worst of all, there's nothing I can do right now. That's not the voice of someone observing a situation. That's the voice of someone who has made the problem a home, decorated the walls with excuses, put a nameplate on the door that says, I belong here. But you weren't born there. You walked into that mindset one choice at a time, and now you don't even realize the door is still open. You see, the brain loves familiarity. It clings to known patterns, even if they hurt, because at least they're predictable. Pain becomes a routine. Discomfort becomes identity. And soon, the problem becomes the comfort zone you hate but refuse to leave. Why? Because leaving means facing the unknown. It means giving up the story you've told yourself 1,000 times. It's not my fault. I tried before. No one supports me. But let me ask you something. If you know this isn't where you want to stay, why are you still feeding it? Why do you keep repeating the same thoughts, having the same conversations, asking the same questions, but never changing the structure? Because every time you focus on the problem, you validate it. You add weight to it. You build emotional muscle memory around it. That's why some people stay stuck for years. Not because they can't change, but because they don't stop rehearsing the pain. And every time they relive it, they reinforce it. Let's make it simple. Every time you say, I can't, you feed the problem. Every time you wait for the perfect moment, you feed the problem. Every time you talk about what went wrong, instead of building what could go right, you feed the problem. You don't need motivation. You need to change your mental diet. You've been feeding the wrong wolf. There's a famous parable Covey often referred to, about two wolves inside every person. One represents anger, fear, blame. The other represents courage, clarity, discipline. Which one wins? The one you feed. And what does feeding look like in real life? It's where you put your attention. It's what you choose to rehearse mentally. It's what you believe without question, even if it's killing your momentum. So if the problem has become your home, the first step isn't blowing it up, it's walking out. It's realizing you don't owe your pain anything. You don't have to protect your trauma by replaying it. You don't have to be loyal to the version of you who struggled just to survive. That version was doing the best it could. but it's not who you have to be anymore. Today, the work begins by catching yourself in the act. The next time your brain starts reciting the usual story, pause. Notice the pattern, and instead of feeding it, interrupt it. Say out loud, "I see the problem, but I choose to feed the solution." Say it even if you don't fully believe it yet. Because belief doesn't come first, repetition does. You can't wait to feel strong to act like someone who solves things. You have to act like that person now, until your mind rewires to match it. That's the essence of leadership. Not in others, in yourself. You made the problem your home, but now you build something better. Step by step, one new thought at a time, one shift in focus at a time. And here's the truth no one tells you. The solution was never outside of you. It was buried under layers of attention you kept giving to the wrong things. This week, you reclaim that focus. Not with wishful thinking, with presence, with intention, with interruption. Because if you stop feeding the problem, it gets weaker, it stops growing, and soon, it stops running your life. Now, if that hit home for you, it's because you're ready. So don't just keep watching. Subscribe now, because what comes next will keep breaking those patterns wide open, and you're not going back to the old narrative anymore. You might think you're just being honest, that talking about your problems is part of processing them, that repeating the story helps you understand it better. But let me ask you, how many times have you told the same story and still felt stuck? There's a difference between reflection and rehearsal. Reflection leads to insight. Rehearsal just reinforces the pain. And the truth is, most people don't reflect, they rehearse. They go over the same situation in their head, word for word. They repeat the same sentences to their friends. They even replay the emotional tone of the experience, like it just happened. Every repetition makes the problem stronger in your nervous system. Every repetition trains your identity to stay in the same spot. Your brain doesn't care if it's true, it cares if it's familiar. So the more you rehearse what's broken, the more your mind begins to operate as if that brokenness is part of who you are. You start saying things like, "That's just how I am. I've always struggled with this. It never works out for me." That's not identity. That's repetition disguised as truth. Stephen Covey taught that we must live by principles, not emotions. But you can't live by principle if your thoughts are on repeat, always echoing what's wrong, what hurt, what didn't work. So the first transformation is this. You have to break the habit of rehearsing what no longer serves you. And yes, it's a habit. It's not just emotional. It's neurological. Every time you tell the story of your limitations, you carve the same groove deeper into your mind. And soon, your subconscious starts running that script without your permission. You don't choose it anymore. It chooses you. And that's when it feels like you're not in control. But here's the shift. Control doesn't come from pushing harder. It comes from redirecting earlier. The moment the thought starts, interrupt it. Don't argue with it. Just say, "Not this again. That version is done." Then replace it. Not with lies, but with direction, with focus, with principle. For example, instead of "I always sabotage my progress," say, "I now build consistency by making the next right choice." Instead of "No one ever supports me," say, "I'm building the strength to support myself first." This isn't just positive thinking. It's reprogramming. And the only way to reprogram something is through repetition in the opposite direction. If you've rehearsed the pain 1,000 times, you'll need to repeat the solution 1,001. Not once, not twice, daily, repeatedly, until it feels more real than the problem. That's the work. It's not glamorous. It's not fast, but it's real, and it frees you. Most people don't want to do that part. They want to understand the problem, intellectualize it, analyze it, but they don't want to let go of it. Because the moment you stop rehearsing what's broken, you have to face the question, so now what? What do I build instead? And that's where the fear comes in. Because the solution requires something the problem didn't. Responsibility, direction, action. It's easier to repeat than to rebuild. But rebuilding is where your power lives. If you want to change your life, stop being a master of the problem and become a builder of the solution. That begins when you stop telling the same story and start living a new one. This is why most change doesn't stick. People try to act differently while still thinking like the version of themselves who stayed stuck. They go to the gym, but still call themselves lazy. They start the business, but still say they're not confident. They cut off the relationship, but still believe they're unworthy of love. That's not transformation. That's conflict, and it always snaps back. So if you're serious about shifting your life, start here. Break the habit of rehearsing what broke you, and begin practicing what will build you. Every time you feel the urge to go back to the old narrative, stop, pause, and say, that version is over. I'm choosing something better now. Write that on your mirror. Put it on your phone. Say it before bed. Repeat it when no one's around. Because your future depends on which voice you allow to speak the loudest when you're alone. Now, I want to hear from you. What's the sentence, the story, the thought you've been rehearsing for too long? Drop it in the comments. And write your replacement. Let the new script begin. Everything you think about gets stronger. That's not philosophy. That's neuroscience. Your brain is a pattern machine, and focus is its fuel. Whatever you direct your attention to, your brain interprets as important. So if you constantly focus on what's wrong, your brain starts filtering the world through that lens. It begins scanning for more problems, more threats, more confirmation of your doubts. That's why you can have a good day and still feel like something's missing. That's why someone can compliment you, and you still remember the one person who didn't. It's not because life is bad. It's because your focus has been hijacked. You've trained yourself to obsess over the issue instead of building the way out. Stephen Covey said, "We become what we repeatedly do." But let's add to that. We also become what we repeatedly focus on. So if your mind is always filled with problems, don't be surprised if your identity becomes shaped by struggle. You don't see opportunities. You don't see options. You don't even see yourself, just your limitations. But here's the shift. Focus isn't passive. It's a choice. And when you reclaim it, you reclaim your power. Imagine this. You're standing in a dark room with a flashlight. Wherever you point it, that's all you see. The rest of the room doesn't disappear, but it becomes invisible to your awareness. Now think about your mind that way. If you point the flashlight toward your pain, your regret, your fear, that's all your world becomes. But if you shift it, even slightly, toward what's possible, what's true, what you can build, your experience changes. The room is the same, but your focus changes everything. So let's get practical. Start noticing where your attention goes when nothing is demanding it. When you're in line, when you wake up, when you're falling asleep. Do your thoughts spiral into everything that's wrong? Do they replay conversations, mistakes, fears? That's not harmless. That's programming. Your subconscious learns through repetition plus emotion. And those quiet, unsupervised moments are where most people reinforce exactly what they're trying to escape. But you can interrupt that pattern. Here's how. Catch it early. The sooner you notice the spiral, the easier it is to stop. Label it. Say, "This is me feeding the problem." Naming it makes it conscious. Shift it. Immediately focus on one thing you're building, choosing, or becoming. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be present. You don't have to fight every thought. You just have to redirect enough of them to build momentum. Because focus compounds. The more you choose direction over distraction, the stronger your clarity becomes. And clarity leads to confidence. Confidence leads to action. Action leads to results. And results begin to overwrite the old identity. That's the chain. And it starts with what you're thinking about when no one's watching. Now, let's go even deeper. Sometimes, the problem feels real because it's emotional. Maybe you've been betrayed. Maybe you've failed over and over. Maybe you've grown up with a storm inside you that no one else can see. And I'm not here to deny your experience, but I am here to challenge your response to it. Because the pain isn't the end, unless you keep staring at it. The moment you redirect your energy toward building something better, the meaning of that pain starts to shift. It's no longer a label. It becomes fuel. Not for anger, for construction. That's what focus gives you. The ability to choose meaning. And meaning changes everything. Focus isn't just about positivity. It's about priority. You prioritize what matters most and refuse to give your power to what wants to drain you. That's leadership. That's ownership. That's what transformation looks like behind the scenes. Not loud, not dramatic, just intentional, consistent, quietly powerful. So here's your reminder. You are not your thoughts. You are what you choose to focus on repeatedly. And if that focus builds you, not breaks you, everything in your life begins to align around that strength. Now, if this is clicking with you, let me know in the comments. What are you choosing to focus on now, starting today? Not just what you want, but what you'll feed. Because your focus is your power, and it's time to use it wisely. You've heard the phrase, you are what you eat. But here's another truth, even more powerful. You are what you feed mentally. And you stay stuck when you keep feeding the version of you that's already expired. Think about it. The identity you're trying to outgrow, the one that hesitates, overthinks, avoids, complains. That identity only survives because you keep giving it food. And what is that food? It's every thought that says, I can't. Every excuse that whispers, later. Every emotion you let drive your day without questioning if it's useful. Every moment you sit in the same routine and say, it's just who I am. That's how the old self stays alive, through your consent. Even your silence feeds it. Because in the absence of direction, your mind defaults to repetition. And repetition is the oxygen of the version you're trying to leave behind. You say you want to grow. You say you want change. But you can't build a new self while keeping the old one well-fed. Starve it. That means you stop giving it airtime. You stop validating its patterns. You stop dressing it up in language that sounds like realism, but is actually just fear. You don't need to destroy your old self with violence. You just need to stop feeding it attention. It will shrink on its own. Let's make this real. You wake up tired, and the voice says, today won't be productive. Might as well start slow. Pause. That's your old self reaching for breakfast. Don't feed it. You're about to make a new choice, take a bold step, and the voice says, what if you fail? Better to stay where it's safe. That's your old self looking for comfort food. Don't feed it. You scroll your phone for 30 minutes, feel guilty, and say, I always sabotage my time. I never follow through. That guilt loop is another form of feeding the same identity. Because even negative attention is attention, and attention keeps it alive. So what do you do instead? You feed the version you're building. You give your focus to the person you're becoming, not the one you're trying to escape. Even if that version feels unfamiliar, even if it's quiet at first, even if it feels like pretending, it's not pretending, it's practicing. You practice being the person who follows through. You practice speaking from clarity, not emotion. You practice showing up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And every time you do, the old self gets weaker. Not because you fought it, but because you stopped nourishing it. This is why Covey taught the principle of first creation. Everything is created twice, first in the mind, then in reality. If you don't create the new version internally through repetition, attention, and decision, then the external change will never last. You'll keep snapping back, because the old self is still well-fed, still dominant, still driving. But the moment you starve the old, the new begins to breathe. It starts as a whisper, then a quiet confidence, then a behavior, then a pattern, then an identity. This is the power of invisible discipline, the kind no one applauds, but that shapes your future quietly, day by day. Now let's go deeper. Sometimes you'll feel like nothing is changing. You'll still hear the old voice. You'll still feel the old emotions. That's okay. Starving the old self doesn't mean it vanishes overnight. It means you stop negotiating with it. You say, I hear you, but I'm not feeding you. I feel this, but I'm not acting on it. This thought is familiar, but it no longer fits. And you move forward anyway. Because your power is not in what you feel, it's in what you choose. And every choice is a vote. A vote for the identity you're building, or the one you're feeding out of habit. So choose wisely. Here's your challenge. For the next 24 hours, notice every moment the old self reaches for attention. Catch it, label it, starve it, and then replace it, even with something simple. A breath, a shift in posture, a clear sentence. That's not me anymore. Say it enough, and it becomes true. Not by magic, by alignment. And if you're serious about that alignment, I want to hear from you. Comment below. What's one behavior, thought, or pattern you're choosing to starting today? Declare it, not for applause, but to anchor the decision. Because the old self only lives as long as you feed it. And now, it's time to let it go hungry. Here's something no one tells you when you finally stop feeding the problem. The solution doesn't arrive like lightning. It arrives like bricks, one by one. Small, heavy, ordinary. And at first, it's frustrating. You want speed. You want proof. You want to feel different now. But growth doesn't care about your urgency. It cares about your alignment. And alignment takes time because building is slow. Think about it. The identity you're trying to leave behind wasn't built overnight. It was sculpted in silence through years of repetition, beliefs, fears, and emotional reactions. So why do we expect the new self to arrive instantly just because we've made a decision? This is where most people quit. They say, I've been trying. I'm doing the work. But nothing's changing. And in that moment, not because of pain, but because of impatience, they feed the problem again. They go back to what's familiar. They say, maybe I'm not ready. Maybe this is just how I am. No, you were ready when you decided to stop feeding what hurts you. You stay ready when you choose to build, even when it feels slow. Building is what sets you free, not because of the result, but because of who you become in the process. When you build, you shift your identity from victim of circumstances to creator of structure. You stop waiting for motivation, and you start designing momentum. You replace, I don't feel like it, with I do it anyway. And slowly, brick by brick, you build a version of yourself that no longer negotiates with excuses. Stephen Covey didn't teach hacks. He taught principles. And principles are slow by nature, but permanent by design. That's why most people ignore them. They want quick. They want easy. They want transformation without repetition. But repetition is the only thing your brain respects. It's not impressed by emotion. It's not moved by your intention. It only rewires through consistent execution. So the question isn't, is it working? The question is, am I building? Are you stacking the bricks daily, or only when you feel good? Are you choosing structure over chaos, even when no one sees it? Are you willing to feel bored, uncomfortable, or uncertain? If that's what it takes to build something that lasts? Because here's the truth. The old self gave you temporary comfort. The new self gives you long-term freedom. But freedom is expensive, and the price is consistency. You're not just changing what you do. You're changing who you trust. The old self trusted emotion. The new self trusts principle. The old self waited for the right mood. The new self creates the right pattern. The old self needed approval. The new self needs alignment. And every day, you choose which one builds. Let's be clear. You will not always feel like it. You will not always see immediate proof. You will have days when nothing seems to move. But if you keep stacking, if you build even when it's slow, if you stay when the old self begs you to run, something shifts. Not dramatically, not all at once, but deeply, permanently. And that shift becomes your baseline. Suddenly, you wake up and realize you didn't think that destructive thought today. You didn't react the same way to that trigger. You didn't need to prove anything to anyone because you were building for yourself. That's how change happens. Not in the big moments, but in the quiet ones where you chose to keep building when it would have been easier to quit. So let's bring it down to earth. What are your bricks today? It might be a new morning routine. It might be a single sentence you say to yourself every hour. It might be 10 minutes of silence to redirect your thoughts. It might be choosing water over distraction, a walk instead of a scroll, a plan instead of an excuse. The bricks look small, but they're not. Because every time you place one, you reinforce. I'm no longer feeding what breaks me. I'm building what frees me. And you don't need applause for that. You don't need motivation for that. You just need to remember why you started. Because you got tired of being held hostage by your own mind. And now, you're becoming the architect. So today, choose one brick. Lay it with intention. And then lay another tomorrow. Not for perfection, for freedom. If you're committed to that kind of building, tell me in the comments. What's the brick you're placing today? Say it. Anchor it. Build from it. You've heard it before. Fake it till you make it. But that's not what we're doing here. We're not faking anything. We're acting from decision, not from feeling. Because here's the truth. You don't become different by waiting to feel different. You become different by acting in alignment with who you want to be, even before it feels natural. That's how identity changes. Not through inspiration, not through understanding, through action. Most people get this backward. They wait to feel confident before speaking up. They wait to feel strong before setting a boundary. They wait to feel disciplined before showing up consistently. And they keep waiting. Because emotion is reactive, it follows behavior. Stephen Covey was clear about this. You can't talk your way out of a problem you behaved your way into. You must behave your way out of it. That's the blueprint. If you want to rewire your identity, you have to move before you're ready. Show up when the old self tells you to stay still. Speak when the pattern says to stay silent. Focus when your habit wants to scroll. Every time you do something new, especially when it's uncomfortable, you're teaching your brain, this is who I am now. And your brain listens, not to your hopes, not to your plans, but to your decisions in motion. Let's make this real. You feel doubt, but you take the action anyway. That's not fake. That's alignment. You feel tired, but you show up for your routine. That's not forcing. That's freedom. You feel triggered, but you respond with clarity. That's not pretending. That's power. You are acting like the person you want to become until it's no longer acting. Because repetition becomes familiarity. Familiarity becomes comfort. Comfort becomes identity. And that's how the shift happens. You can read every book, watch every video, plan every step. But if you don't act from your new standard, you'll keep reinforcing the old one. And here's the brutal truth. Every time you say, "That's just not me," you're choosing the past. Every time you avoid discomfort in the name of being authentic, you're reinforcing your limits, not your values. Real authenticity isn't about repeating your defaults. It's about honoring your direction. So here's the shift. Decide who you are, then act like it. Not once. Not when it's easy. Every day. Especially when the old self tries to take the wheel. Because the old identity is loud. It will try to pull you back with guilt, comfort, and nostalgia. It will whisper, "You're doing too much. You're changing too fast. You'll burn out." Ignore it. You're not moving too fast. You're just finally moving in the right direction. And yes, it will feel awkward. Yes, it will feel uncertain. But do you know what else feels that way? Growth. You're not supposed to feel ready. You're supposed to feel committed. Because every version of you that you admire, the one who follows through, who leads, who speaks with clarity, they weren't born that way. They were built, decision by decision, action by action. And you're doing the same now. Let's go even deeper. There will be moments when it feels like nothing is changing. You'll still feel the same emotions, still hear the same inner dialogue. But what matters is not the presence of old patterns. It's whether or not you obey them. Disobedience is the beginning of freedom. The moment you act outside the loop, you weaken it. And the more you act from your new center, the more that becomes your default. So stop asking, "When will I feel different?" And start asking, "What does my future self do in this moment? And can I do that now?" That's the question that reprograms your mind. That's the behavior that redefines your identity. That's the shift that no one can do for you, but you can do it starting now. So take a breath. Stand up straighter. Make the call. Do the task. Speak the truth. Keep the promise. Act like the person you're becoming. And you'll become them faster than you ever thought possible. And if you're with me, drop it in the comments. What's one action you'll take today that's different from your old self? Not a goal, not a plan, a step. Taken now. Now you see it. The problem wasn't just the situation. It was how you kept reinforcing it, feeding it, believing it, calling it you. But not anymore. Because this entire journey, every step you've taken so far, has been about one thing: reclaiming your power to focus. And using that focus to build, not recycle pain. You've seen the pattern. You've interrupted it. You've starved the voice that kept dragging you back. And you've laid the first bricks of something new. But now comes the real test. What do you do after the breakthrough? Because this is where most people unconsciously rebuild the cage they just escaped. They get a taste of clarity. They feel stronger, lighter, more in control. And then they slip back into the familiar, thinking, I've got this now. But listen carefully. The mind always returns to what is rehearsed. If you don't continue choosing this new focus, if you don't protect what you just started building, if you don't keep feeding your direction intentionally, the old self will find a way back in. And it won't knock. It'll slide in through habits, through autopilot mornings, through one harmless excuse that sounds like rest but tastes like retreat. This is where most people lose momentum, not because they failed, but because they stopped feeding the new identity after the pain passed. So let's make something clear right now. This isn't a moment. This is a lifestyle. You don't just stop feeding the problem today. You stop feeding it every day, even when no one's watching. Especially then, because discipline is not what you do when you feel inspired. It's what you build into your life when you've decided who you no longer want to be. And you already decided. You're no longer the version that survives chaos. You're the version that creates structure. You're no longer the one who needs permission. You're the one who moves because it's aligned. You're no longer feeding the loop. You're building the way out. And yes, it's slow. Yes, it's quiet. But that's what real transformation sounds like. It's not applause. It's not motivation. It's not some viral moment. It's one clear voice in your mind that says, this time, I keep the promise. And every time you act from that voice, every time you return to focus, every time you choose to build instead of repeat, you reinforce the only identity that matters. The one you choose, the one you lead, the one you build with your own hands. So here's how we close this chapter. Not by saying, I hope I stay consistent, but by deciding, I'm not returning to the version of me that created the pain. Not by waiting to feel inspired again, but by structuring your environment so that discipline becomes inevitable. And not by wondering when things will change, but by showing up as the version of you that makes change non-negotiable. Because this isn't the end of the video. It's the start of the next level. So if these words stayed with you, it's for a reason. And if they woke something in you, don't leave it unspoken. Drop a comment. Let the new identity speak. Even if it's just one sentence. Even if it's simple. Say, I'm done feeding the problem. I'm building now. And if that's true for you, make this space your proof. And before you go, if you haven't yet, subscribe. Not for content. For accountability. For reminders that this time, you're not falling back. This time, you're not rebuilding the cage. You're building freedom. And you're not doing it alone. Now go watch the next video. Because this identity you're choosing needs reinforcement. And in that next video, we're not just building. We're protecting what you've already created.